Hello, party people! As promised, I said I would be going live today. Bear with me because I'm going live on three different platforms. We have Instagram here. Hi, everyone on Instagram Live. Hi, everyone on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So I will be mostly looking right here and I'll make sure I pop in there to see some comments. Not gonna lie to you, not wearing my glasses. So if I miss your comment or you see me squinting, please shout out to our nearsighted folks out there. I'm going to dive right in. Our conversation today is all about what happens when you find yourself being laid off. And I'm going to talk about a few different versions of being laid off, whether you've been laid off because there were budget cuts and you were kind of separated from your organization. So I'm going to talk about job separations in general. Right. So if you were laid off, or if you chose to voluntarily leave your organization, and for whatever reason you find that you've separated from your job and you're now wondering, like, what happens next? So that's what our conversation today is going to be about. And I'm having it here as a live so that you can watch the recap. If you don't know who I am, and maybe someone shared this with you and you're watching it in the recap, my name is Timmy Como. I am a coach with the Pivot Strategist, and my main goal is to help people pivot successfully into whatever stage of life they have coming up next. And so, whether that is that you're deciding to pivot into a new job or opportunity, or you're deciding to take a sabbatical, which is my favorite thing to talk about, I'll talk about sabbaticals in just a bit, or if you're just deciding that you want to take some time to just explore different things or pivot to an entirely different industry area. It's really up to you, and I want to help you navigate that. So I'll start with a story time. If you are not familiar with my story, I posted a video on YouTube, I guess maybe 2.5 years ago at this point, where I went on a sabbatical. So I was working at a really cushy, really great job with a great title in upstate New York. I was the associate director of recruitment and diversity, very fancy. And I just got to the point where I realized, oh man, there's so many things going on in my life that I had to make a switch. I had to do a pivot. And I had been working in education, first as a middle school teacher, and then working in higher education. So I absolutely loved it. But I knew that for my own personal development, I had to make some changes. Also, I was originally from Texas and I was living in upstate New York, and I was really struggling being so far away from my family in a cold city. So I knew that I needed to make some changes. And so this first part of the story about my sabbatical, I want to tell you what to do if you feel like a job separation is coming. If you are not sure that you want to leave, or if you even feel like maybe you might be fired soon or let go soon, whatever terminology we want to use, I would love for you to go into it prepared. It's always good to have a plan. No one ever really plans to get fired or plans to be let go, but I want you to enter into it with as much peace as possible. So, first scenario: what happens to you if you feel like you might be if you feel like you might be separating from your job soon? So, first thing you do, number one, I gotta say this: keep it on lockdown. Close your mouth. Do not go around telling people, well, I'm leaving this job anyway. I hate these people. I'm not going to be here for long. Keep all of that stuff in your mind. So, whether it is animosity that you feel towards the organization, maybe they really did do you wrong and you need to get out of there. Maybe it's a toxic environment. Maybe it's just not. Maybe it's just not the right fit for you anymore. If that's the case, just make purpose in your mind that you're just going to leave, and do that quietly. The worst thing you can do is to share that plan with someone and share it before you're there, and it can get sabotaged in many ways. So oftentimes you hear people say, like, oh, the workplace, we're a family. Nah. I would say some people say that's a red flag. I'd say it's a yellow flag. I think most people are trying to say that it's a warm environment where you can grow and you can find great colleagues that you like. And so I think when you hear people saying it's a family, you have to tell yourself, at the end of the day, it's a place where you work. It's a place that pays your bills. You might happen to really enjoy the people that you work with. You might find that you're really, really loving the job, but never fall into the trap of just saying, like, oh, we're a family. I can just I can just not use wisdom and I can just like be free. Be comfortable and be yourself, be authentic, but watch out with some of that freedom that can lead to you telling your plans of leaving prematurely. I'm going to squint and look over here at one of the comments. Good morning. What's good? So yes. So if you feel like there's a separation coming, keep that close to your chest as much as possible. Don't share it prematurely, right? So that's the first thing. Keep it quiet. And then second, start to look, depending on what time of the year it is, start to look at things that you might be leaving on the table when you go. So do you have a promotion coming up that there's a performance review, and with that promotion, you can get a salary bump? If it is that that salary bump is coming and you want to leave the job at a certain level of income, or you want to leave the job at a certain title, be mindful of your timing for that, right? At the same time, if you're moving into a higher responsibility, like you're you're being promoted from being a manager to being a director, you want to make sure that you are being responsible about how you do that handoff. So this is one thing that you could say whatever you want to say about the way people transition from organizations, but this is one thing that I always pride myself on, trying to leave as well as you can, right? Leaving a place better than you found it. When I was separating from my last employer, I really enjoyed working in that space and I really cared about the office. I cared about the students that I worked with, so much so that I wanted to make sure that whoever took my job next would be set up for success. So months before I left, I don't even know if they realized this, months before I left, I had an idea that I would have to transition and pivot soon. I started to create a manual for my job. The work that I had done, the job had been vacant before me. So I inherited this huge office and there wasn't really anyone to help me transition into my job. I thought that was a shame. And I had to do a lot of that learning on my own. And I didn't want that for my predecessor, my successor, sorry. I didn't want that for my successor. I wanted them to be set up for success. So I started to think about like, what does my job entail? What are the ins and outs? What are the daily routines? What are the daily routines that a person would have to do in order to, sorry, there's interruption there. Are we still live? Oh, it changed my perspective, but you can still see. What are the things that a person would have to do in order to be successful? So I literally created a job manual, a manual where I was able to say, this is the role, this is what it entails, these are the dates to know, this is the special information, these are the people, the contacts that would be good partners to you in this work. And so I would always keep those things. I kept track of them. I made actual electronic folders where I put all the important documents and things like that, because it was just so wild that I inherited a job and nobody told me how to do my job. They were just like, you seem competent, go for it, which seems like a compliment, but it's in the work world, it doesn't make sense. You're not setting people up. So I always try to make a manual before I go. So I made a whole manual, had it in a flash drive. And this is the kind of weird thing. I was in this office with someone who felt like institutional knowledge was power. And so for that, I had to be careful to make sure that I shared the information and made sure my successor got access to the information before I left. So I had in my mind who I wanted my successor to be. I'd watched their career. I was really impressed with the work that they did. So before I was transitioning, I started having conversations like, hey, would you be interested in my role were I to vacate it? What is your career goals looking like? Would you be interested in coming into this role? I did say that you should be discreet, but as much as I could, I tried to plan it out as much as I could timing wise. I'm a bit of an overkill person because I worked in human resources, so I even coordinated with human resources, but I would not recommend that for you. I would just say if you are someone in a director or a senior role and you have an idea that your job is going to be hard to replace, if you can make it a smooth handoff, I would encourage you to do it. You're not obligated to, but I would encourage you to do it if you're able. So yes, I actually found my successor, told them about the role, gauged their area of interest, saw if the timing would work out. And so when I left, I tried to leave as peacefully as possible. The timing is not always going to work that way. So that's an ideal situation. If the situation happens that you get a phenomenal job and you have to separate earlier than expected, it's still customary to do the 2 weeks notice. I've been hearing a lot of people say, oh, you don't need the 2 weeks notice, forget that job. Well, if your industry is small, you don't want to burn bridges at all. Even if you're not feeling super great about your former employer, even if you had to leave there because it was a toxic work environment, you still want to be a person who's operating with maturity because it goes back to reflect you. No one's going to ask what they were doing, they're going to ask what you did. So, for yourself, make sure that you show up and you transition as well as you can. Do your 2 weeks. This is something I would tell people. This is a weird thing for me to say. If you're a person who is an overachiever, you might, as you can tell from my story of finding my successor, you might feel like, oh, I have to prove myself and burn myself to the ground on my way out. Don't do that. Don't do that. Especially if you can give yourself a little bit of a gap from where you end your last role to where you jump into the next one. Give yourself a little bit of a gap. I'm not a proponent of people leaving a job and starting the next week. If possible, give yourself like a week or two to process, because no matter what you're shifting to, you're pivoting to, even if it's in the same company at a different department, your mind still needs time to reset to say, like, hey, I was working in this job for however long, and now I'm shifting to a totally new thing. So you want to give yourself enough time to do that transition. So if it's generous enough that you can get a month, that's amazing. If you can get a couple weeks, that's good too. So for me, if you can do that back to back, that's great. One of the things that is a reality is like, what happens if you transition out of a job and you don't find another job for quite some time? So full transparency, when I left my previous role, my first sabbatical that I took, as I left that job, I left knowing that I was so burnt out and I needed to move back home and I needed a change of scenery. I did not have a job when I left, and that was a risk that I took, a risk that I actually would not recommend to people. I just want to be honest about that. I know sometimes people can say, like, hey, just leave and just go do what you need to do. I would say, if possible, give yourself enough time to start thinking about when you want to do that pivot, like, oh, this pivot is coming. Start looking for jobs and try to wait until you have a new role in hand. I mean, paperwork signed, everything before you put in your 2 weeks notice, Um, Y'all, I've heard, I don't know what the job market is doing right now, but I've heard horror stories. Like a former colleague of mine left our organization, got a great role, and they decided not to have him actually start the role. So he couldn't backpedal and come back to the organization. He was then on a frenzied search to find a new one. So by the grace of God, I'm praying that doesn't happen to you, which is why you have to be really wise with the wisdom, keeping it to yourself. If you told everyone like, oh, I'm leaving this place, blah, 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 and you burn bridges, it's really hard to come back if you need to. So there's that piece. So yes, if you sense it's coming, make sure you're doing all those things, kind of like dotting your I's, crossing your T's before you leave. Sometimes there'll be projects that you don't get to finish, and that's okay. Bring it to a landing spot that you feel comfortable handing it over. If there are instructions that could be put along with your project, great. If not, just bring it to a place, a close in the project where you can hand it off to someone. That's in an ideal world, right? Don't be one of those people who scatters everything and like burns down everything intentionally out of spite. That's not good. Just leave things as you can as you're transitioning out. So that's the practical piece. Another really practical piece that I would say, if you sense that a job separation is coming, please use up your benefits. Oh my gosh. This is something that I made sure I did. Please make sure you use your benefits. I'm talking about medical, healthcare, because you never know how long your separation from a job might be. I'll pause for a moment and note that I always talk about job separations in terms of, I want to make sure I'm still going live. There it goes. Okay. Job separation, I always talk about them as sabbaticals. I call them sabbaticals because it's a reframing of something, right? Because whenever people separate from a job, they start to own, if you're not careful, right? Start to own the identity of being unemployed. And unemployed has this stigma with it, first of all, and then it has this heaviness to it that sometimes it's unwarranted, right? Many times, if you were in a work environment that you just knew wasn't a good fit anymore, sometimes the job separation was necessary for the employer and also for you. Maybe it didn't happen in a pleasant way, and sometimes that's really unfortunate, but that separation was necessary. So I always called them sabbaticals, whether they were sabbaticals that you had planned or sabbaticals that you kind of land into, because you do have this space and time in your life. On one of my previous videos, one of my subscribers, her name is Taylor T, she left me a great comment and she was saying, one thing that you can do if you find yourself in this season of being in a sabbatical unexpectedly is, she said, regroup, reset, and to pivot. That's what I would have said. So she took the words right out of my mouth. And that's exactly what you do. So I'll come back to that in a second, right? If you feel like this job separation is coming and you have enough time to use up your benefits, depending on what time of the year it is, please make sure you do that. Go to as many doctor's appointments as you need to, your annual physical, your women's wellness check, all of those things. Go to the dentist, for the love of God. Most people with their insurance get about like 1 to 2 cleanings per year. Go to do that, please. Any prescriptions that you can get. If you have an FSA, y'all, I'll have a video about an FSA later on in the year. But if you have an FSA and you haven't yet figured it out, used up your money, as long as you've been contributing into it, that FSA money belongs to you and you actually don't get to take it with you. So you forfeit it and it just goes back and it's wasted. So if you have FSA money left over, remember FSA money runs out every December and it starts all over again. If you're not going to be employed there anymore, you won't be able to roll it over. So this is a technicality, but you can purchase so many things with your FSA. I always recommend, all of your staples for your medicine cabinet, like pain medication, period products, sunscreen, all of those things that you'll need. Just go ahead and grab those and make sure you utilize that benefit that is there for you. So use up your FSA, go to all your doctor's appointments, do all of those things so that if for whatever reason your sabbatical ends up being longer than you expected, you're not out there like, oh my gosh, I wish I had gotten glasses. That's another thing. Get your glasses. One of the things that I did was that I could either get glasses or I could get contacts. And so I would just I think I bought a 90-day supply, or you can get like a year's, you can get 90-day supply for mine, 90-day supply of contacts because I wear the dailies. And I got those and I just bought my glasses from like a discount online place. So I got my eye, dental, physical, all those things taken care of. So when I went on my sabbatical, I wasn't as worried like, oh my gosh, I haven't been to the doctor in over a year. That wasn't my issue. I had gone freshly going into my sabbatical. So that's what I want for you, to not have to worry about that piece. There are other things to think about like, what will your healthcare be? And there are all these discount healthcare companies. I heard of one called Mira, and Mira is one that you can use. It's like a lower cost that you can pay. So look up a few of those because you won't have your company's healthcare while you transition. Another thing, if you sense it's coming, then what if it actually happens? So when it actually happens and you get separated from the job, it really just depends about how the separation happens, right? If it was something that you're being laid off due to budget cuts, it hits differently than when you're like laid off for performance issues, or if you've been laid off just because, it wasn't a good fit, termination types of things. So I would always say, whenever that sabbatical happens, make sure you check in with yourself. Like for real, check in on yourself. Whenever I went through my sabbatical, I remember just feeling like, I'm embarrassed to say this, I felt really, really hurt and embarrassed about it. Because sometimes it can feel like, oh my goodness, like I'm a good worker. How could I get laid off? Or how could I have to separate from a job? That's just such a raw place to be. So first of all, acknowledge that. I want you to also know the reason I'm making this video in the first place is that it's actually quite common that people have to separate from their jobs, either being fired or being laid off. I get enough comments in my YouTube channel, videos, or even when I have coaching clients that reach out to me. Many times it's because they're facing a pivot because they had an unexpected job separation that maybe lasted longer than they would like. So I want you to know, first of all, that embarrassment and that shame, don't sit in it too long. Lots of people, lots of really smart, amazing people have been laid off, have been fired, have been, separated from a job. And so I want you to not internalize that to mean that there's something wrong with you. So that's the first piece. Secondly, I want you to have your wits about you. If you are in a situation where you have been separated from the organization, they've asked you to remove all of your equipment, bring it back to the office. In those moments, just cooperate. I know it's hard. That's the place you want to be. Spiteful. Sometimes you have the temptation to maybe burn down the whole office or something. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't be the person leaving out there with a screaming match. Keep your dignity. It's never a good thing when someone has to be removed from an organization. So don't let it be that they got the best out of you in that moment. Even if it's a toxic work environment that you're leaving, don't let it be that it's said yeah, I told you she was a mess to begin with. You're not a mess. You had to separate from the organization for whatever reason. Fine. Let's just move on. Keep your dignity about you. That's the biggest thing. If you feel like you're losing it and you feel like you can't keep your composure, just take a moment and think about how you want to leave in a classy, dignified way, even if they don't deserve it, right? Because sometimes it can be really, really, really challenging. So there's that piece there. Then, practically speaking, start thinking about unemployment benefits. As a person who's been working and you've been contributing to your 401k and other things like that, you are entitled to unemployment most times. It's different. So this is the thing. I'm talking about job separations. It's different if you voluntarily left the organization. So if you left the organization and you are being you resigned, you might not be eligible. In most cases, you're not eligible for unemployment. If you are somebody who was laid off, you're fired, in most cases, you are eligible to apply for unemployment. With unemployment, you're going to have to prove every couple weeks or so that you are actually applying for jobs, that you're doing some kind of job preparation activity. But sometimes just having that unemployment benefit can give you that peace of mind. So let's say you have to pay some bills, you have to pay for your rent or pay for your car bills or anything like that. You can have that benefit available to you as well. I live in Houston, and in Houston, they had rental assistance for some people. So just make sure you know what your benefits are. And then secondly, I want you to also start thinking about the reset part, right? This is something I talk to my coaching clients about. Some of these job separations are blessings in disguise. Sometimes they're very disguised because they look awful and they look like something that you feel like maybe you might never recover from. So I'm going to tell you, first off, you will recover and you will be able to get back to your career. But to the point we made earlier with regroup, reset, and pivot, when you take a moment to reset, I want you to start asking yourself, is this the life I actually wanted? Is this the life I actually wanted? This is something I talk to my coaching clients about a lot. Many times people are intelligent and competent, so they end up in a lot of different types of jobs that don't speak to their strengths, don't speak to the things that that they're well suited for. And notice I'm not even necessarily saying passion, because I don't think that you have to work in your area of passion. This is just my personal thing. What I do think you ought to do is work in your zone of genius. Your zone of genius is where your skill sets and your strengths meet with the things that you're just wired to do really well. And so that's when you find your jackpot. And this is a moment when you figure out oh, I've been laid off, I've been separated from a job. It's a really good time to think how do I want to move? Do I want to stay in the same industry? Do I want to try something completely different? What does that require, right? If you're pivoting, sometimes you might actually need to get a whole new set of skills. That's what happened to me when I was on my sabbatical, when I left higher education. In order for me to pivot into human resources and coaching, I had to get a couple certifications. And so I went through the training in the time between my jobs. I was sitting there getting my education. I was networking. I was meeting people. So when you come to this reset stage of the laid off period, I want you to reset. I want you to think about all the old habits that you had, that you felt like you had to do for your job. And then I want you to now think about the things that you get to do, the things that you want to do. Even if it's something as simple as your morning routine. Many people were running to work, rushing, and found that they were so stressed out at work. You might find, like for me, for example, during my sabbatical, I discovered about myself that I'm extremely productive in the morning time, and I'm somebody who gets a lot of work done. I like having meetings with people more so like in the early afternoons, right after lunch. Where people are energized and I can talk to them. And I like my meetings to be succinct. I don't like them to be overly long for no reason. And hey, good morning, Johnny. Thanks for joining. So I learned those things about myself during my sabbatical. I want you to do the same kind of research for yourself. What makes you tick? What makes you really getting in the groove of things? Are you a night owl? Do you prefer most of your work to be done in the evenings so that you can have a later morning? So know those things about yourself, because it helps you figure out what should you be looking for when you're applying for jobs. And there is a lot of variety out there, and you do have options. So I want to break that lie that you might be thinking that, oh, there are only so many jobs and I won't be able to do this and that. That's not true. I want you to really think about the fact that you have lots of options out there. I want you to be selective. Be selective. Don't just take the first thing that happens. At the same time, if you are in the position where you just need to quickly pay bills and you need to take care of those things, it's okay to take a holdover job. But I'll give you a caveat here. Don't let your hold off over job become your permanent situation. That happens way too often, where you take a job to make ends meet and you forget to look for another job. And so I'm not encouraging that you should just be job hopping, but I want you to start to look for the thing that is the best alignment for you. Alignment is the best way to approach job searching because it helps you and it helps your future employer. If you are aligned in your job, remember, aligned in that zone of genius, you're good at it and you actually prefer to do it, you enjoy it. That yields really good results for you, but also for your employer, for your teams that you work on. So that is the sweet spot, finding something within your zone of genius. How does one find their zone of genius? It actually takes a lot of reflection. One of the questions that had been asked to me on my YouTube comments was that, what's the best tool for that? I have a couple great tools that could be helpful for you. I wrote a book called The Pivot Journal and The Pivot Planner, and they have tools in them. I highly recommend for this case, The Pivot Journal has a lot of questions where you can start reviewing what is the life that you want for yourself? What's your life vision? What are the top things that you would like to accomplish in your life? What are your values? And then from there, you start to look at your life. In the next few quarters, what would I like to do? What are the goals that I want to attach myself to? What can I commit to? And it's good to look at things quarter by quarter. Remember, quarters are 3-month intervals, right? Because your life could change dramatically in 3 months. So it's best to look at your life in bite-sized chunks, because if you start to say, oh, what's going to happen next year? You don't know. Life can change so much for the good, but you never know what's coming up. So it can be really great and really helpful to look at your life in bite-sized quarterly chunks. So I would encourage you to do that. So even if you don't use my journal, start to do those kinds of reflections on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis. I will leave in the comments somehow on my page a link to my sample page. On my sample page, especially if you're someone who is laid off, you might want a budget option for how to start doing this reset and reflection stage. So my sample pages are extremely discounted, and you can Use them on your tablet, or you can even print them out and start asking yourself these really great questions. So that's the first option. My pivot journal planner sheets, they can help you with some of these questions that you might be asking as you're evaluating, what do I do next? The second option is a coaching session. My coaching sessions always come with something called the Harrison Assessment. And you do an assessment where you assess, okay, what are my gifts? What are my talents? What are my strengths? What are the things that I actually prefer to do? Not just the things that I'm good at. And from there, you start to really explore what would be the career sweet spot. There's even a test which is so fun. It's like a career test, and it looks at your gifts and talents. It looks at your preferences. It looks at your strengths, and it says, okay, what are the careers that are well suited? It kind of reminds me of in high school. Like, don't I wish I had that career test? I will say in high school, I was a totally different person. And even for you in your former career, you might have been a totally different person. And maybe now your priorities have shifted and you need to pivot in a different direction. That's okay. That's why we do these quarterly evaluations. Is what I wanted yesterday the same as what I want today? Oftentimes it's not, and it's okay to make a quick adjustment to address that. Okay, so now we went through the regroup. You process through all your emotions. You see, okay, how do I feel? And then you do your reset. Okay, if I could start from scratch, what would I do? What would I do if I wasn't afraid? What would I do if I was sitting smack dab in my zone of genius? What would I do? Then you start to think about, okay, what do I want to explore? I might need to pivot completely. And what does it require for me to successfully make that pivot? Remember, I mentioned earlier, you might need some additional training. You might need to get close. For me, I'm a person who has to see what it is that I'm going into. I'm just a very visual person. If I can see someone doing the job, I can understand it better. So that might require you to do some job shadowing. It might require you to talk to some people and ask them what they enjoy about their jobs, how they got to where they are. Ask people if they be willing to serve as a mentor to you in this season, to do check-ins. Remember, I will tell you this about mentors. Mentors are people that you check in with and you share your progress. They are not therapists. Mentors are not therapists. And so you don't want to just have your pity party, woe is me with them. There is a place for that. Make sure you have people with whom you can share your grievances and you can talk to. For me, um, I love therapy, but in that sabbatical time, I didn't have therapy coverage. So I made sure I had a circle of women and mentors who were praying for me, who were keeping me accountable, making sure I was actually applying for jobs, who were connecting me to people in their network. I had to actually open my mouth and say, hey, I'm on a sabbatical, but I'm looking for work. Do you have any opportunities that might be a good fit for my skill sets? You got to tell your friends that you trust, and invite them into that season of life with you, so that they can help support you on that journey. So start surrounding yourself with really great people. I talk about in my pivot journal that everyone needs a winner's circle, right? You have the people in the inner courts of your life, the inner circles of your life. These are people you share your hopes and your dreams and all of the hardship that you have, all of the things that you keep close to your chest. And then a little bit further removed from those people are people within your winner's circle. These are your accountability partners. These are your mentors. These are your sponsors, the people who would talk about you and speak your name in rooms where you are not yet there. These are all kinds of people who are people you look up to, but they might not be as close to the chest. So you need all of these people. And then in the outer circle, there is your are your acquaintances, people that you work with. This is one thing I'll say. Because I mentioned that you shouldn't burn bridges, it's really important. I know you might have left in an unfavorable way, right? Truly, truly. You might have left like they might have like tossed you out on your behind in a very disrespectful manner. Um, you might still have people at the organization that you have a good relationship with, regardless of how things ended. And so, if there are even just one or two people that you worked really well with, keep in contact with them. You don't have to stay connected to the organization, but you never know who knows whom. And as long as these people can vouch for you and how well you work, even outside of the job separation, these people could be really great allies for you in your job search. So don't burn bridges and try to keep as dignified as you can, because it could be helpful to stay connected to those people. You never know what connections they can have that could help you in the future. So I will say you don't have to be fake and try to love your former employer if you are not a fan of them. In those cases, just keep quiet. You do see sometimes on Glassdoor, if there really is something toxic about an environment that needs to be shared with people, and you can share that in a, once again, dignified, respectful way, do that, because it does reflect on you how you talk about your previous employer, especially when you start to go into interviews and you are talking about your experience. They're listening for how you're talking about your former employer, because if you talk about your former employer in a certain way, if things go awry with them, they might be concerned that you would talk about them in a similar unfavorable light. So just make sure that if it wasn't the best job separation, that you tailor your language around that so you can talk about that in interviews. So the questions might go, why did you separate from your former employer? It could be, I decided I wanted to make a pivot into a different industry that was outside of where I was currently working. So I knew I had to make a shift. So conversations like that, or, it just wasn't a good fit. I had different career goals and I had to make a shift to a different place. I had family obligations, whatever it is that you want to use, make sure you stay as like high level as you can and don't get into the nitty gritty. Don't try to bring the interviewer into whatever mess that you escape from by the grace of God. Just try to keep it as high level as you can, just to say, I separated from that organization, or, I did what I was hired to do. My job was done. My projects were done. I felt comfortable transitioning into my next opportunity because I finished the work I was hired to do. Whatever it is, you might need to practice with friends about how that comes up, but you want to make sure you share that separation status as neutrally as you can. You want to make sure you've gotten some of the emotion out of it, so it's not you still feeling tense and hurt about it, or anything like that. Obviously, if you separated from an organization, they're not expecting you to be like lullabies and sunshine and happiness about it, but they want to see if you can be mature about it. Also, now talking to recruiters about your sabbatical. I keep calling it a sabbatical because I want you to be thinking about it that way. And when you're on a sabbatical, sabbaticals are becoming way more popular now. Some people call it a sabbatical, some people call it a career break, but make sure that it's something that you're using in a meaningful way, right? You're totally within your rights when you first get separated from a job to sit on the couch and eat bonbons for a couple weeks just to, flesh it out. Been there, done that. But you want to make sure that after that, you pivot and shift into a different mindset, because your sabbatical time is meant to be meaningful, whatever that means for you. So, this is why you have a pivot plan. Think about what you're wanting to pivot into, and that would help you think about how to use your time wisely. Let me see quick. Oh, thanks. I didn't know I had an accent, but I think I do. I was born in Nigeria, lived in London, raised in Houston. So that is the accent that you're hearing. I'm responding to a comment on Instagram. So yes, if you're talking about your sabbatical, I want you to think about it as such, right? Something that you're using meaningfully. If you know where you're going after you pivot, you want to make sure that you have a pivot plan. And so your sabbatical time, you're using it to prep you for that pivot plan. So let me give you an example. One of my clients, I love the way he used his sabbatical. So my client is an engineer by trade, and he had a sabbatical where he, separated from this organization, and he and his wife started a YouTube channel, and he is like the operations behind the beautiful YouTube channels that, videos that they create. And so he's an engineer by trade, but this guy is running cameras. He's doing logistics for all the travel that they do. He's helping with brand deals. He's flying the drone. He's doing all these things. And he is working with sales, all of this stuff. And so when we first started talking, he's like, oh, I know it looks like I'm using my sabbatical in a truly random way, but I find that it's been meaningful. I got to spend time with my family, and I got to pivot and shift into some other things. And, he and I talked about it. We looked at his resume, we tailored some things, we did some coaching about how to talk about it in interviews. And when he went into interviews, he was amazing because he has the technical background. But when it came time to explaining why he had this gap in his career, he was able to talk about how he was using it in such a robust manner. He spent his time exploring, learning new skills. He was doing all kinds of training and certification while also building this huge platform on YouTube. And so you might be like, man, maybe my sabbatical activities are so random. It's okay. You are a person, and interviewers typically like to see that you're a person with real interests, and real things that you do. I'm also reminded, a cousin of mine, I think she's on Instagram here. My cousin was coaching me about some ways that I could demonstrate to employers that I was trying to pivot in a certain direction. And so she recommended that I make a portfolio. That's another thing that you can do. You can take some of the work that you're doing and design a portfolio. This is the thing I always tell clients. If you are pivoting in a direction that seems almost random, you have to give the recruiter the narrative so that they are not thinking that you are just out here randomly exploring things and you have no direction. First of all, nothing is random in this world. If you have a desire to lean in a totally different direction, it's something that you've probably thought about for some time. And you probably already have experiences in your life that lend themselves to that thing, right? So, for example, I'm a former middle school teacher. And when I was wanting to move into human resources and training and coaching, as a teacher, I can work with so many different audiences. I'm able to adapt my message. I can make it as simple or as complicated and advanced as I need to. I can literally instruct. I'm somebody who is creative, so I find different ways to present information. I've also been a YouTuber for over a decade. So being in front of the camera, talking to people, I'm totally comfortable and confident in those things. And so all of these random life experiences, I was able to tie them into a portfolio and a series of different experiences that could demonstrate that I had these skill sets, I had these propensities, that it wouldn't be a leap for me to do the work that I was being required to do. So I say that to say, as you're in this sabbatical period of this pivot planning that you're doing, I want you to start forming the narrative. Hear me. I will never ask you, I will never suggest that you lie. I will never suggest that you fabricate things on your resume. I will always tell you to look at things that you have done before. And I would ask you to think about, are they adjacent? Are they near any of the things that you want to do in the future? And you might have to use a little bit of creative thinking to think about how that works. But you will always have the opportunity to take your work experience and even sometimes your life experience and use it for the new role or the new industry that you're trying to pivot into. Okay, so always go in with a plan and be open because your plan might turn out totally different than what you were expecting. So stay open minded and take note of the fact that even when you have no's, when you're applying for these jobs, they're leading you closer and closer to what you want to do. I'll tell you right now, there was a time I had a job interview for my dream job, one of my dream jobs. And it had been my dream job for over 5 years, I'd say, a long time. And I thought I always wanted to work at that company, and I prepped for the interview, and I sat in the interview. And as we were talking and I was listening to the people talk about their experiences, they'd ask like, hey, do you have any questions? And I'd ask like, okay, what do you think is one of the most challenging things that you go through on a day-to-day basis? And they started to explain the challenges of their work and the work environment and the dynamics of the things that they do. And in that moment, I was like, oh, I don't like that. I don't want to work in an environment like that. And they were just like answering me candidly. But in that interview process, it revealed parts of the organization and the style of work that I really did not like. They were incompatible with my zones of genius and with the ways that I work, my work life preferences. And I thought to myself, like, ooh, I really don't want that. So in that moment, I had a choice Do I still try to pursue this thing because it's been my dream job, or do I once again pivot because the thing I thought I wanted wasn't really what I wanted when I saw it presented to me? So be prepared for that as well. Hold all of your dreams and ambitions loosely, loosely. Still be driven, still be ambitious as a person, but realize that where you land might be something that you could have never dreamt of. It might be a job that didn't even exist. The last two roles that I've had were roles that were created out of nowhere. They didn't exist, and they said, "Hey, there's a role here, and we want to see if you can try it out." The type of person who thrives in being an inaugural person in a role, the first to ever do it, the one to set the standard. I enjoy that. For some people, they don't like that at all. So there are roles out there that people are experimenting with, and there comes a little bit of risk with that. But if you are the type of person who enjoys that, great. There are industries that never existed before, and so you see people flooding into tech. I will add this one piece. Tech is important, but I want you to have an open minded view of what tech could be. Tech could be any industry, it could be education, it could be healthcare. Because we live in a technologically savvy world, there will be a tech bend to almost all roles moving forward. So don't feel like you have to go and learn how to code. If you are a teacher, you can become an instructional designer. If you are somebody who does human resources, there's human resources for tech companies. Or I remember I went to a recruitment event for Pinterest, and I totally forgot that Pinterest is a tech company. I don't know why it didn't click in my mind, but some of your favorite brands that you enjoy have a tech side to them. Netflix that you love watching, all of these spaces, they are tech companies. So be mindful that you might not be the coder, you might be the recruiter, you might be the person who is a project manager, all of those things. There are many different ways to get into these new industries. So ask around, ask people how they got there, and be willing to network. All right, so we're coming to the end of the hour, and I want to pause. I want to say, first of all, thank you to everyone who joined, um, everyone who was here and just diving into the conversation about going on a sabbatical after being laid off. But if you are someone who has been laid off, I want to say congrats to you because you're now on a sabbatical. And I want you to start embracing that language for yourself. I promise that it will do wonders for your mental health. I will also say I'm highly empathetic to what it feels like to be in a sabbatical period and not knowing when the sabbatical is going to be over. Many people who go on a traditional sabbatical, they typically know from this date to this date is when my sabbatical is going to be over. When you enter into a sabbatical, on the other hand, from a layoff or from a job separation, it can feel a little bit different. And so take time to do all the things that we talked about, to regroup, to reset, and pivot. I need to give Taylor a super, super shout out because that's such a great set of three. But make sure you're doing all those things, that you're taking care of yourself, taking care of your mental health, of your physical health. One of the things, so simple, but for me, because I had the time being on a sabbatical, I integrated the practice of taking a morning walk, taking time to pray, to talk to God, to just be out in nature. It's something that I couldn't do when I was working my 9 to 5, but now it's something I'm like, oh, it's something that centers me. It gets me going for the day. So whatever it is for you, I want you to really figure that out. Embrace this new routine of being on a sabbatical. It's totally different, obviously, from when you're working your other job. Also, I didn't mention this earlier, but the sabbatical period is a great time to start exploring some of your other talents and some of your other hobbies. There is a temptation during a sabbatical to try and make a hobby a hustle. Recognize when a thing is a hobby and it's something that is being done to spark joy and to keep you lifted, and when something has the ability to turn a profit. So for me, I really enjoyed working with people. I really missed that aspect. And I'd already gotten my coaching certification before I got my job separation, before I left my last role. And so I was like, man, I really want to continue this even while on sabbatical. So that's why I still coach. That's why I'm able to still really work with people, because it's something that's enjoyable for me. It's not a hobby, it's a business. And so I started a business while on my sabbatical. And it's definitely something that comes up during interviews, like, hey, this is a whole business. It's not just a little hobby or just uh, something that I do on the side. It's a side hustle. It's like my business, the thing that I do because I really, really enjoy it. And I started doing it before my sabbatical, and now it's something that I am doing full fledged, and I really, really enjoy it. So for you, that could be all sorts of things. I don't want you to underestimate the fact that you have this talent. My cousin always says, just because something comes easily to you doesn't mean that it's easy. So you might have a gifting that you're sitting on. So I want you to explore that during this sabbatical time. That's what this is for, to explore. If you had the freedom to do anything you wanted, what would you do? And sometimes we can't think about that because we're under the pressure of like, how do I pay the bills? How do I do all these things? Remember, unemployment is something you can apply for. Please, please, please do that. The first time I went on sabbatical, I didn't take unemployment because I resigned. So it wasn't something that was available to me. So I can feel the difference in myself. I just lived off my savings that first sabbatical, which was like kind of scary seeing my savings dwindle. But then if you're in the situation where you're on sabbatical and you have the option to have unemployment, it can be incredibly helpful as you're applying for jobs, as you're thinking of your pivot plan, what you want to do next. All right. So, like I said, we are coming to a close. As a coach, I always offer prayer to my clients because I know this can be an extremely sensitive and heavy time for anyone who is on a sabbatical, thinking about what comes next, formulating their pivot plan. So I'm actually going to pray to close us out. In Jesus' name, Lord, I thank you for today. I thank you for anyone who stumbled on this video. I sense that it's because they or someone they know needed the encouragement to know that just because you've been laid off or just because you've been separated from a job, that doesn't mean that you don't have worth. And it doesn't mean that you are somebody who is bad at employment or being at these offices. I pray that God, you would just first and foremost comfort them, that you would give them a peace that transcends all understanding. I pray that it would guard their hearts and minds from depression, from anxiety, from bitterness, from pain, and all of the other things that can be associated with separating from a job. And Lord, I pray that in this time of sabbatical, that they would find rest, that they would not be striving or even trying to prove themselves to anyone. I pray that they would be content and satisfied with the fact that they are exactly who they need to be. And any kind of growing and maturing that they need to do, this sabbatical period is the opportunity that they have for that. And I pray that you help them to have wisdom to use it wisely. I pray that they would be magnets of favor, that they would connect with the right people who need their skill sets, that they would connect with people who are willing to serve as mentors, to serve as advocates, to connect them with opportunities that would be good for them. I pray that, Lord, in the season of their life, that they would not be discouraged, that any voice in their head that is overly critical or negative, that they would have their ears shut to that, but that they would still hear wisdom. But at the same time, they would be able to be uplifted and held in a high place. And so, Lord, I just thank you for your protection. I thank you for your favor. I'm reminded of a quote from a book that says, we're in such a good position because when we are children of God, when we know you, you know us, and you also know everyone. So we are 1 degree of separation from everyone that we need to know. And so, Lord, I thank you that even right now that you are connecting people to the opportunities that they need. I pray that you bless them. I pray for their future workplaces, that they would be healthy, that they would be places where they can really flourish and thrive in their zone of genius. I pray that you would even prepare these workplaces for these phenomenal workers that are coming their way. And Lord, truth be told, if we have any habits as employees that are unhealthy, that are toxic, that are from a striving nature, that don't have work balance, I pray that even in our sabbatical periods, that you would remove that from us, that we would have excellence in the work that we do, that we would have high quality in our jobs, that we would really bring our best foot forward. I pray that you would help us all find workplaces that would value us and where we will find value as well. And so, Lord, in the mighty name of Jesus, I just release your people into all of these amazing job opportunities that you have for them. God, even the people that don't believe in you, I pray that you would show them favor and kindness and mercy in the job search. I pray that they would be blessed in the mighty name of Jesus. Amen. Amen. Yeah. One thing about me, I'm gonna pray. And so, if you were a client of mine and you don't want me to pray out loud, I will just keep my prayers in my heart. But you are always in my prayers, always in my thoughts. I know it's not easy to separate from a job, whether it is voluntary or involuntary. It's always a challenge. And so, as you interact with me, I will try to provide as much value as possible. Last thing I'll say before I go, I'm going to try and post it on the screen here. If you want a copy of my pivot planner, it is available on my website, and it is under www.timmycomo.com/pivot. And that is where you can find my pivot journal. If you are the planner sort and you want to get the pivot planner, that is available as well. When you get to my website, on my website, you have two versions of my pivot journal that you can get. There is a digital version, and there is also a hard copy that you can write on. If you're someone who has a tablet and you want to write with a digital pen, like a Apple Pencil or something like that, it's really ideal for that. I nerded out on it because I designed it so that you can write on it digitally if you want to, or you can use any of the trackers that are provided. So many great things if you use the digital version. It's kind of my favorite. Anyway, y'all, thank you so much for joining. We spent a whole hour talking about what to do when you're laid off or if you sense you're about to be laid off. So this will be available for replay. Please share it with any friends that need the encouragement or just a little bit of guidance. It's not the end of the world when you get laid off. I know it feels that way. Woo! Oh gosh. What is going on here? Okay, I know it feels that way, but it is not. So yes, I'm going to end because I think my audio messed up on my other stream. But thank you all so much for joining. I pray you have a fantastic day. I pray you have a blessed search when it comes to job searching and pivot planning. I'm here to help. I am the pivot strategist. So please let me know if I can help you. I'm going to put my other website here, link. If you want to do a coaching session with me, and you go to www.timmycomo.com/coach, you can actually sign up for a session with me. My session is, I have the 15-minute complimentary call if you just want to see what's going on and hear if it will be a good fit for you, or if you want to actually go and do the full-blown coaching session with me, the Harrison assessment, that is available to you as well. I see that my Instagram is going haywire right now, but thank you so much for joining me on YouTube and on LinkedIn and on Instagram. Thank you all so much. Have a fantastic day. Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining. That is a madness. Like, what? What is that? So